That's new. Okay. So the computer is actually talking to me this time. Okay, so we're going to start. It's 11 o'clock. We already have quite a few people online, and I'm sure people will still be jumping on as we're speaking. But we are joined today by John Imbriale, and of course, John has been. And this is not to date you, John, but you've been around the scene for a while. You're not new to the scene, although last year you came on as full-time caller in New York. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit, set it up for us a little bit, what your background is in horse racing, when you started in New York, and really, you know, early days, what was your connection to horse racing?
Yeah, so just as a follow-up to what you were saying, being experienced really just means you've gotten very old. So that's my case. But anyway, the shorter version, I was working at a company called Sports Phone in 1979. That was before computers and before ESPN, and before there was really any other way to get results. Anyway, my uncle saw an ad in the newspaper. There was an announcers contest, and if you won the contest, you got a job in the press office. You didn't become an announcer. Anyway, entered the contest, called a race at Belmont, got the job in the press office. That was November of 1979. And a lot has happened since then. Worked in a lot of different departments. And it really was kind of like the mid-90s when I kind of became Tom Durkin's backup on a full-time basis. If you can become a full-time if it can become a full-time situation as the backup. And, you know, was the backup to Tom for all his remaining years. He left in his last year was 2014. Larry came on board. I was his backup. And once I got to be, you know, mid 60s, I just kind of thought, okay, well, that's it. And I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do for however longer and wrap it up. And the opportunity came about in the winter of 2020, I guess it was. Just trying to get my year straight, and got the full-time gig. And then of course I get the full-time gig. They switch around the triple crown. They change the order. They change the distances. The pandemic happens. There's no fans, but now we're kind of getting back to where we should be.
You know, John, does that really affect you? Like, because last year was such a bizarre year. You came on, I think you started like full time, like calling the regular meet like in June, right? When we came back for racing. And so, obviously it was a crazy year last year. No, you know, there weren't fans in the stands. And did that affect you directly in terms of what you do and what you have to do? Or was it pretty much just the same thing for you besides all of that?
Mostly didn't affect me, but it did a little. If you look at the Belmont Stakes, which again was at a different time last year, or you look at the Saratoga meet, you just naturally get pumped up for those races. Would it have been better if there were fans there? Yes. But once you're ready to go and the mic goes on, you're going to do what you do, whether there's fans in the stands or not. Now, we want the fans, and it's going to be a lot more fun at Saratoga this year. Also, the booths are different. Belmont, you are basically enclosed. You're way up on top. You can hear the fans when there's a big crowd, but that really is only the case, to be blunt, for a couple of days at the Belmont meet. Saratoga, you're kind of right in the middle of the action. So you can hear fans, for every race. And at Saratoga, starting again this year, there are a great number of fans there every day. So that's something to look forward to this year.
Okay. And now, guys, as we're going along, if you have a question for John as we go along, I'll be asking him questions. But if you guys have a question that jumps up, just let me know. Either put up the hand up signal, or even maybe just wave at me and just let me know. And then we'll open up your mic so you can ask him a question. But I see Tom Durkin. We know we're going to bring Tom into this conversation in a minute.
Who the heck invited him? And
I
who is he
know.
anyway?
So Tom is actually our managing partner. So yeah.
Yeah, who invited you, Imbriale? I'm the managing partner. Who invited you? That's what I want.
I don't know. I get an email from Christina. Want to do this? What do I know? I don't know. I had to have an assistant here just to get me hooked up to this. I can't even spell Zoom. No less know how to hook up.
Yeah.
So now, so John, when you were a kid, did you have like a direct involvement with horses or horse racing, or through family? Like, I mean, when you were a young boy, or was it just something that you got into later on in life? You worked at the track and that kind of thing.
My brother and some uncles were more interested in horse racing and what was going on. I really didn't. The year and the horse and the situation that got me hooked was affirmed in 1978 and Steve Coffin. That's kind of when I really started to, to pay attention. But I really didn't think I was ever going to I wasn't pursuing a career in horse racing. Like I said, it just happened to be something that I tried to do with that contest and fell into it. But always a sports fan. I mean, went to college for broadcasting, had aspirations of being a play-by-play person or a disc jockey, as I guess they don't call them disc jockeys anymore, whatever they call them on the radio. But that didn't work out, but this did work out. So it's been good.
Do you think it's something that has to come to you naturally in terms of the announcing? Is it something that you find that some people just have a stronger, and this is obviously a question for Tom as well, but is it something that you have just a stronger grasp to it, or is it really a learned skill?
I think it might be a combination. I mean, I never thought of being an announcer, a racetrack announcer, up until the time I got to the track and really entered the contest. That really had never entered my mind. I guess whatever particular voice you've been blessed with has an effect or an impact on whether or not you can pursue this particular line of work. But if you listen around the country to the different announcers, boy, there's a great variety of voices and types and different approaches. And so I'm not really sure how to answer that question. It's a good question though.
Okay.
That other fellow might be able to answer better.
The other fellow being here, Tom. Do you have a hold on a second. I think you're muted if you just want to unmute. Tom, Tom, I think you're muted. Hold on. Tom,
it wasn't me.
Unmute. There I am.
Hold on a second. We're going to try to get Tom's.
Can
Tom
you hear
might
me
be
now?
up. Yes, we can hear you. Tom, do you have a slightly do you have a slightly different answer to that question? I was just asking about, do you think it's a learned skill, or is it really, or do you think some people just have a natural affinity for it, for announcing?
No, it's learned. I mean, I was really crappy when I started. I mean, it took me a long time to learn it. So it's learned. I mean, to excel at it, you have to have a certain kinds of predilections, I guess. For me, I like words. I like being show off. I could memorize, and it took me a long time to figure out why I could memorize. It was because I took Latin, and in high school, and it was the only subject that I really ever excelled in. And it's just a matter of repetition, and you just have to repeat. Repetition is the mother of learning. And that's how I learned the memorization techniques, which separates racetrack announcers from, most other sports announcers.
Okay,
but that's learned.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it helps sometimes if you're from the Midwest and you don't talk like this, because I had a Chicago accent, and that wasn't going to fly too good. Being a racetrack announcer.
Where'd you leave the accent?
Pursuit of employment.
Well, I guess this question probably would be for both of you. Are there a few tricks of the trade? Are there things that maybe we don't really realize in terms of what goes into what you both do? Are there some tricks of the trade maybe that are not just apparent to us at first glance?
I pray a little. I mean, I don't know if that's a trick of the trade, but I think Tom kind of hit the nail, on the head with it's repetition, and I think we are all very, very anal because we are always conscious of time to post, how much time you have, hitting it at the right time. That's all done by you can't really repeat it enough. You go over it and over it and over it. Preparation, doesn't even start the day of, especially with big races. You're looking at stuff and, memorizing silks even before, the big day comes. But it's just and it's, most people do focus obviously on the big races and big days, but it's the same scenario, on a Thursday or Friday at Belmont or Aqueduct. You've got 8 or 9 races and you've got to do the same process. And if you don't do the same process, it'll come back to bite you.
Mm-hmm. And are there ever days when you walk away and you think to yourself, wow, that was a great day. You really hit it out of the park. And then other days where you're like, oh, that was just awful. Like, do you really carry that off into the next day, or does it end with that day?
For me, the best comparison would be a baseball closer. You've got to turn the page. And in the closer's case, they've got till the next day. In our case, if we screw up race 5, we've still got 4 more to go. So we have to turn the page, and we all screw up to a certain degree at some point. You just have to move on, and you have to block it out. And yeah, you kind of know when you hit a good one, and you definitely know when you hit a bad one. But it's moving to the next race.
Yeah, I used to have a terrible, as time went by, I got much better at it, but I used to be, if I made a mistake, just brutal. I mean, I'd lose it. As years went by, I learned how to control it. One day at Saratoga, I called the wrong horse on the far turn, and I picked up my computer and smashed it to bits. So it can get expensive making mistakes at Saratoga. It can. But I guess you soften up a little bit when you get older, literally, figuratively. But you just have to go on. And what John said too about you got to turn the page and you got 4 more races left. The real hard part is in the first race of the day, I could memorize field in a minute and a half, maybe, if I was a little familiar with them. But mental fatigue sets in as the day goes on. And that last race, I need all 10 minutes, because my head is just a jumble of words and colors associated with one horse and same color associated with another horse. And as time, in the first race, red means Christina. Okay. In the second race, red means Diana. Third race, red means Susan and Bill. Fourth race means Mary. So you gotta by the end of the day, it's like red. What is it? Christina, Sparrow, Mary. What was this?
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like it would be challenging. And I mean, on a different degree, like I used to do the announcing, like not announcing, like I was a commentator and I would do Gulfstream and that. And the mental fatigue, especially after a long week and long days, by the end, your brain is just fried, so you just get so I can't, you guys really still have to maintain your focus to really be on point. But
yeah, now let me ask John, I mean, you took some time off, right? Before Saratoga?
I took what, time off just recently, you mean?
Yeah.
I took 1 day.
Oh, was that it? Okay, because I
took 1 day. Yeah, last Thursday.
So John's doing a Frank Miramati imitation. It's supposed to be the other way around.
Yeah, exactly right. And by the way, getting back to your point with the colors, one thing Tom pointed out to me, which I never thought of, because he called harness racing at the Meadowlands as well, and those silks, right, were the same for the drivers in every race, right?
Yeah. Harness racing is a lot harder to call than thoroughbred racing, believe it or not.
That's amazing. And again, how do you so then what do you, with the harness horses, what do you do? What are you memorizing? If you're not memorizing the colors, are you memorizing the silks? Is that it? Like pretty much, what do you look at, Tom?
You look at the colors, and you can also see harness racing. You can see the saddle pads a bit. Thoroughbred racing, you can't, because if one horse gets to next to it, you can't. I've never looked at a saddle number ever in my life doing thoroughbreds, because but in harness, you can kind of do that because there's spacing between them. But I didn't like to do that, because if you go to the numbers, then you got to look down at your program, and you just don't want to do that.
Okay. I guess, so John, have you, and this really, it was so strange, because I was doing a little background reading and checking, just to see like some of your, where, some of the things that you did earlier in your career, and, people that you were involved with. And it was so strange, because as I was reading about, the name Harvey Pack came up. And then yesterday, lo and behold, like within an hour that I'm doing this research, I see that Harvey Pack just passed away. And, obviously Harvey I know that he factored into your career, but can you tell us a little bit about some of the people who really factored into your career, including Harvey, and really what you maybe gleaned from each of them, up until where you are today?
Well, and I've said this many times before, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that he's sitting there too, but I've been surrounded by some of the tremendous talents in horse racing. My first real kind of gig was to sit in on the weekly Frank Wright show on the production meetings, and I would kind of help him with any video that we had. So I got to know and sit on the weekly OTB show, I guess is what they called it, with Frank Wright, Charles C. Canny, Marshall Cassidy, top-notch producer and director, and just, you learn by observing. And, that was a tremendous thing to do. Then, Marshall Cassidy clearly, worked with me on a regular basis, really. I would go next door, I remember at Aqueduct, and record the race into record it into a recorder, and then I'd go into the booth with him, and he'd watch it back with me and make comments, good and bad, to try to help me out. And then the fall of 1990, Tom comes along, and like I said before, kind of mid 90s, became his backup. And we never really sat down and discussed things. But probably the most relevant thing that he said to me was that don't listen to him. Now, I had to listen to him based on what I was doing. I was involved in TV shows and stuff like that. But what he was saying was, create your own style, be yourself. And it's very hard, because he had so many catchphrases, very hard to stay away from those. And I really consciously have tried to stay away from those. But then you just watch his preparation, you watch how he does things, and you can't duplicate, his calls, but you learn from how he went about things. And then, of course, Harvey, the same thing. I made, a comment that Dave Brenning called yesterday after he had passed away. And Harvey was tremendous at just doing things off the top of his head. He very, very rarely made notes. And that was good because, well, he was able to do it, but it came across as being so natural because he wasn't going by any script. And that was one of his charms, really. And of course, there wasn't anything he wouldn't say, which was also one of his charms. He had a great wit, and he was a big influence. And I'm sure there's other people that I'm not remembering right now, but I've been tremendously lucky just to be around the people that I've been around.
Well, do you also think that's a function of being in New York as well? Because New York obviously had some tremendous talent in every regard, whether it's training, writing, announcer, really it's been, New York really does have a very unique, but also a lot of the best end up in New York, don't they?
I mean, no question. When you start to bring up, trainers and jockeys and stuff like that, going back, being able to watch Cordero and Georgie Velasquez and the great riders back then, and Pat Day, and then the trainers with Woody and Mac Miller and names that I'm not remembering right now, but surrounded by that. And I think from the announcing standpoint, there's really two ways you can do it. I got lucky. I was able to I left for 6 weeks to get booed in Chicago, Tom's hometown. But besides that, I was able to stay in New York, as a backup all the years. the other way you can do it, obviously, is to go like Tom did, and start at smaller places and then build your resume, and move from there. I was lucky enough to remain in New York for 99% of the time.
Now, you mentioned earlier, so everybody, I'm not sure if, because some people have been jumping on as we went along. If anybody has a question, please let us know, either wave or put the hand up signal. Oh, I think somebody actually does have a question for you. Hold on. Ray, did you have a question? Hold on. I think somebody might have a question. Let me try to get Ray. Ray, did you have a question that you wanted to? Here, I'm gonna let you know if you can unmute, and then you can tell me if you wanna. Ray, did you have a question for John?
No, I didn't. I'm just
Oh,
enjoying listening. I don't know if I did something by accident or not.
Oh, okay, no problem, no problem. Again, if anybody has a question, just let us know, and then we'll just let me know, and then we'll put you through here. But you mentioned, John, you mentioned Affirmed and Alidar. So you actually saw Affirmed and Alidar. You were there, that you actually saw them, not on TV, right? You saw them in person, correct?
Well, a few races when they were 2-year-olds at Belmont. And then I was there for the Belmont Stakes in 1978. Yes.
Okay. Now, were there any other horses that really stand out to you that you felt like might have been either the best horse you ever saw race, or maybe one of the best, but really something that had an impact on?
Well, I was lucky enough to see the Seattle Slew Belmont as well. And, he was way up there, no question about it. I think he got more, adulation in losing the Jockey Club Gold Cup than he did anything else. And then, looking back, and he was, I don't know if everybody, realizes it, but they kind of pounded him as not beating anybody in the Triple Crown, and 17,500 for the purchase price and all that. He really didn't get his due until his career was over, and then he became a tremendous stallion as well. But if you ask me for names that stick out, Slew, Affirmed, John Henry, Cigar, Rachel Alexandra, those are the ones that come, that pop in pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. And anything in terms?
I never got to see Secretariat live, only on TV. Okay.
Now, was there anything that you would be the best horse that you ever called in a race?
Again, based on my backup role, I didn't get until the last couple of years, the top-notch horses in the big races. Maybe the 3-year-old this year is going to turn out to be something special. I don't know, essential quality. So I'll hold off on that until I back it in to figure out who might have been the best one I was lucky enough to call.
Okay. We do have a question from one of our members. Chris, I think your mic is up if you want to go ahead and ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. First, I just want to thank you, John, and Tom too, for popping in. And I used to always grew up going to Saratoga. My father would always catch you guys on your walk from the booth to the room, wherever you would go afterwards, and he would say hello, and you would always be very kind to talk to him and listen to what he had to say. So
the room I went to afterwards was a bar. Where were you talking? I went from the booth to Ciroc.
Much needed, I'm sure. Much needed, I'm sure. But I just wanted to start with that, and then my question, John, was for you in terms of, I've been able to see in certain videos the process that Tom goes through in calling a race, where he had the rig set up in front of him and would glance down at the program with the colors on it. Is there did you adopt that style? Do you have your own method of doing it? Do you just watch the horses going around? That was my first question. My other one was, you mentioned the process of preparation for a certain race day and memorizing. What is that process like that you go through? And does it start the day before? What is like that day in the life of a race caller in terms of the preparation for the race-based races?
To your first question, when I was working under Marshall, he didn't color his program, and neither did I. Tom was the first one that I saw do it. I understand that Dave Johnson did that as well. So I do color my program now, and it's a good reference point in case you get stuck or whatever the case might be as far as memorization. And it is just horse with colors memorization, when they really, for me, it's when they're in the paddock. I'll start looking then. I'll add blinkers to the program if that's the case. Even shadow rolls I'll put on the program. Anything that will help me help me with the memorization, and then help me if I need it during the race. As far as pre-day, I will look at the entries primarily because of pronunciations, just because we've gotten to the age where, especially with the Godolphin and the Shadwell horses, there are some names there, they have 17 vowels in the name. And, you got to try to figure out how you're going to say it. And I can't call the Sheik up, to ask him, how he wants it said. So I will definitely look at that. For big races, for me anyway, I'll start looking at the Belmont, because you kind of know who's going to run the Belmont, the Travers, a week before, and start actually playing around with index cards, which again, was something that Tom did. Make some notes that you may use during the call of the race, know what the colors are, obviously have the entire field in your mind. So by the time the day comes, you've got the field, now it's just a matter of, of calling the race. So I hope that answered both your questions.
Okay. I think it did. And my thought is, you guys are right. You're working it's in the moment, it's live, it's in the moment, and it's going with the flow. Like when something, let's say, and again, I guess sometimes you might, like Tom alluded to earlier, like, you may call the wrong horse or something like that. But to me, I just find it amazing that in that moment, you'll have to, if something goes wrong, how do you keep your mind in the game? Like, how do you not at that moment be like, oh, and just keep going through it and just get yourself through that? Is it experience, or is it something that you kind of fall back to try to get yourself back on track while you're doing it? I don't mean when you're looking back on it. I mean, when you're in the middle of it.
I think Tom touched on that before, as we get a little older, you kind of are able to deal with the mistakes a little bit better. But it stays with you. There's no question about it. You may get through the rest of the day, but at least in my case, I'm thinking about that night. And, and I can also say announcers have very similar dreams. We all dream about not being in the booth when the race goes off. We dream
It's absolutely true.
calling wrong horses. We have nightmares that are very, very similar. And there's Tom to perhaps agree or disagree.
Had one last night, and I talked to Dave Johnson from time to time, and we sent our emails back and forth, and sometimes, these wacky dreams that we had. And I still have them now. It's been 7 years since I called a race. And the craziest stuff, elevator. And when I'm at Aqueduct, I'm on the first floor, and this happens all the time. I go, oh God, I came in the wrong entrance. I got to go to that elevator, and that elevator wouldn't go up. And then I'd go up, and I'd have to run through the mutual department, and they'd kick me out of there. And one time I went up, and there were no lenses on my binoculars. And then one time I was calling the Kentucky Derby, and a cruise ship appeared at the top of the stretch, and I couldn't see the horses. And some of these things that were so totally absurd.
Right.
And it goes on. I could keep you here till next week with stories of these nightmares that I have. And then I finally realized that, like, Tom, you can do this. Your subconscious is telling you that something as ridiculous as the Star of Norway appearing at the top of the stretch at Churchill Downs is going to stop you from calling the race. That's how stupid this stuff is. You can do this. And it's kind of served me as a reminder, the more absurd the dreams got, that my subconscious was actually telling me, you can do this. It's something so absurd would have to happen because of the level of preparation that you go through, that you can do it. The key is preparation. I've never, one thing when we talk about the mistakes, one thing I came to realize was that mistakes are going to happen. Now, if a mistake were to happen due to my lack of preparation, I'd have slit my throat. But sometimes mistakes happen. There's nothing you can do about it. But as long as you prepare yourself, over prepare, do the work, then you really can't beat yourself up that much.
And getting back to the dreams for a second, mine are much more simple. Most of the time, I'm just in the men's room.
Yeah.
And you missed the race.
Exactly right.
Tell me, John, you're really not a bedwetter, are you? I mean, please.
I refuse to answer that question on certain grounds.
So we actually had one of the members has a question. Hold on a second. Ashok, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually don't have a question, but I do have a comment to make that I think might interest everybody. The other day on America's Day of the Races, the commentators were having a little discussion about calling a race. And I think it was Andy Serling, if I'm not mistaken, who basically said that it's the toughest job at the track, bar none. And one of the sort of accidental experiences that I had, in fact, on the same day, is that I had the TV on in the living room, and I just happened to be in the kitchen during one of the races that wasn't really that interesting to me. And so I was listening to your call, John, and I got to tell you, it created this mental picture in my mind where I didn't actually need to see the TV. I didn't need to see the race. Your call was so good. And I consider both you and Tom and other race callers really as storytellers, right? And you tell 9 or 10 stories every day. Each one is about 1.5 to 2.5 minutes long, and they're all different. And as I said, when I heard your call, I didn't need to see the TV. You just created that mental picture that really replaced whatever was playing on, in the video on television. And I would encourage everybody to do that once to really understand how good these guys are.
Good.
Well, I will not get a bigger compliment than that. So I thank you very much for that, for your kind words. That's really what we try to do. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't, but thank you very much for that.
Now, didn't you work in the press office back in the day? Did you find that maybe early days working in different capacities in racing? And I don't know if you were, because you were on the notes team, weren't you also doing notes at one time?
Well, we did backstretch notes, sure.
Backstretch notes and stuff. So
Right.
There was some level of writing that you did. Do you find that maybe, to what Ashok was saying, does that help now when you actually have to write something in a concise fashion? Do you find that carries over when you actually have to express yourself verbally? And this is a question for Tom as well.
Well, to be blunt, I was and never will be a great writer.
Mm-hmm.
That's to my buddy over there. That's who is really the linguist and the student of the English language. And by the way, he hasn't said it here. I know he said it before, but he used the dictionary every single day that he called. That's not something I do, but I hope that I can still, emit the right words during the call of the race. As far as your question is concerned, I think, and I never really thought about that. I'm not sure if it did help. It certainly didn't hurt. The many departments that I've worked in, I think all just kind of added a little bit to wherever I am right now. I think that's one thing that's really lacking right now, is that people don't have the opportunity to work in different departments and really understand a lot of things that go on at the track. I never worked in mutuals, but I did pay attention to wagering and stuff like that. You need to know just basically what pools you're going to lose if there's a certain amount of scratches. As simplistic as that sounds, sometimes it gets a little confusing. So I think all the different departments that I have worked in simulcasting, you get to deal with and talk to other tracks. The press office that you spoke about, I worked on the very first media guide that we put out and went through all kinds of files about Belmont Stakes traditions and Belmont Park traditions, and it all builds to your individual resume. And I think throughout the years, it certainly has been a plus.
Okay.
What I did, John and I had different paths. I came up through the bush tracks, Quad City Downs, Miles Park, Cahokia Downs, Fairmont Park, the Waiawega County Fair, places like that. And when I worked at in Balmoral Park, and when I worked at Tampa Bay Downs, when I worked at those places, you had more than one job, So for instance, at Balmoral, I was the track announcer. I was the morning line maker. I was the director of publicity and the director of promotions.
Wow.
And in between meetings, I cleaned out stalls in the backstretch. So that it was different. Now, when you go to New York, like, I have an assistant. You mean, when I worked at the Meadowlands, I was Dave Johnston's assistant, and like we had 3 announcers. So it's a different experience depending on how your career path is.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, and again, I think in racing in general, I find a lot of tracks and a lot of, maybe not at the bigger tracks now, but you do find yourself having to multitask and to do a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really, really good point. But
I also, when I worked at the Cahokia Downs and also at Tampa, I was the public handicapper for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the public handicapper for the Tampa Bay Tribune. Now, it wouldn't look good if the track announcer had his picks in the paper every day. So I had a pseudonym. My name as a handicapper was Dirk Thomas.
Very nice.
Selections by Dirk Thomas.
I want to say a little bit, that sounds like a porn star there, but Tom. But you know
I
what?
have other talents.
But so John, one of the members had emailed and asked to ask you a question. Now, this might be putting you a little bit on the spot. You might have to, I'm going to leave it to you how you want to frame this. But basically, they were asking, like, if you were going to have like a dream traverse, like a dream race, and that you have to pick a handful of runners that you would want to see in this particular traverse, this edition of the Traverse, who are some of the horses, 3-year-olds, that you saw maybe throughout your career, maybe the last 30, 40 years, that you think would have been in that particular dream, that dream matchup race?
Well, of the ones that, I actually would be more interested in seeing the ones I didn't see. I mean, I would love to have seen, Citation and, oops.
Hold on.
Do we need to mute you there, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. We lost Tom for a minute.
And just as a heads up, Christina, I've got another thing to go to in about 4 minutes. If that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, get back to the question. Clearly, clearly Secretariat, the ones I mentioned before, Seattle Slew, Affirmed, American Pharaoh. Trying to think if there's I like Holy Bull, when he ran a great Travers. Trying to think of any ones that to me, you've got to keep those special ones special. And if you start just adding names, I think it kind of diminishes what the real exceptional ones were. And for me, those 5 or 6 that I mentioned are the ones that stick out. Now, I think everybody's got their personal favorites, but if you really kind of look at records and what the horses accomplished, same thing, if you're a baseball fan, you've got your favorites, but listen, I was a big Roger Maris fan, but I can't get around the fact that he was a lifetime 260 hitter. That's why he's not in the Hall of Fame. He set but anyway, you just try to be objective as you can. And those 5 or 6 that I mentioned would be the ones. But again, like I said, would love to add, Citation to the mix and not so much Sir Barton, but the Citation is the one that sticks out of the early, Triple Crown winners.
Okay. I don't know if anybody has a quick question to ask John because he's got to go. So if anybody has a quick question they want to ask him, and if not, we're gonna wrap up here. I don't see anything. Hold on, let me just scroll through, make sure no, I don't see anything. John, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really, really a pleasure. I'm sure we'll see you up in Saratoga. I'm sure we're going to see also Tom up in Saratoga, and actually many of you. We have an event on July 22nd for all the members, who a lot of the members are going to be coming out. So John, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with the meet this year.
You're very welcome, and best of luck to everybody in the club. Thank you, Christina.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, also for joining us as well and giving us your, sharing your pearls of wisdom. It's always entertaining. And Tom, I don't know if you're going to be joining us for our event on the 20s up in Saratoga in a couple of weeks' time. I'm sorry, is somebody, hold on a second. Hold on, let me just mute John there. Hold on, let me see if I can unmute. Okay, there, I think Tom can be unmuted.
There we go.
Yes.
The 22nd.
It's a Wednesday. Is it the 21st? I think it's the 18th.
Thursday is the 22nd.
21st. It's the 21st. I'm sorry. It's the 21st. It's a Wednesday.
I've got a speech I got to give at 5 o'clock, so I'll try to get over there.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna do a morning workouts. We're gonna be out there in the morning workouts, and then we're gonna do an afternoon at the races. So whatever you can come to, that's great. But thank you, everybody. Actually, we had a great turnout today, and obviously Tom made it extra special joining John Imbriale. But thank you, everybody, for joining. And like I said earlier, if in case any of you missed it, we are receiving passes, free passes for free admission to NYRA tracks, so both Belmont and Saratoga. I'm going to be sending those out hopefully within the next week, and hopefully you'll get them. Just please make sure you go online, go onto the club website, and make sure that your mailing address is up to date, because I want to, and if you would like to have me hand them to you on the 21st when we see each other at the event, or in the morning for the morning workouts, just email me as well, and I'll just keep yours and I'll hand it to you if you just want to make sure you get it in your hand, the passes in the hand, as well as opposed to me mailing them out and risking them in the mail. A couple of you have unmuted. Did you want to say anything, Jim, or?
Just thanks. Thanks for organizing this. This was great.
Oh, great. We'll try to have a couple of them. We'll intersperse them now because we're at Saratoga. I'm going to try. Obviously, we're trying to do some live events here over the next few weeks, and hopefully many of you can attend that, because several of you actually came out on Monday for Community Adjusted's race. So we'll be in touch. But like I said, if you guys can just make sure to update your mailing addresses on the website, on the team website, to make sure that you guys get the carts in good order. Okay, folks, unless anybody has anything else to share, that's it. That's it for today. Thank you for joining, and we'll see each other soon. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good one.